Hello and welcome. We begin in Ukraine, where President Vladimir Zelensky has met European leaders in London, pushing for more missile support and stronger sanctions against Russia as the war nears its fourth year. Zelensky met Prime Minister Keir Starmer and NATO allies who pledged unity and fresh support for Ukraine's defense. Now, Britain announced plans to fast-track over 100 air defense missiles as part of a $2.1 billion deal with Kyiv. Leaders also discussed using $250 billion in frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's resistance. Tensions with NATO rose as Lithuania accused Russian jets of violating its airspace, a claim Moscow denies. Now, Zelensky and Starmer are expected to address reporters later today. Croatia's parliament has voted to reintroduce compulsory military service, ending a 17-year suspension of conscription. The move comes amid heightened tensions in Europe over the Russia-Ukraine war and a growing arms buildup in the Balkans. Lawmakers approved the measure with a wide margin, 84 votes in favor, 11 against, and 30 abstentions, paving the way for 2 months of basic training for new recruits. The Defense Ministry says the goal is to equip young citizens with essential skills for nation or national security and crisis response. Those born in 2007 will be the first to undergo medical screening later this year, with the option of civilian service for consensus objectives.
Konačni prijedlog zakona o izmjenama i dopunama Zakona o obrani. Da je donesen Zakon o izmjenama i dopunama Zakona o službi u Oružanim snagama Republike Hrvatske.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called off trade negotiations with Canada, accusing Ottawa of egregious behavior over a political ad that featured late President Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs. Now, the ad, produced by Ontario's provincial government, used Reagan's 1987 radio address to warn that tariffs trigger trade wars and job losses. Remarks the Reagan Foundation says were edited out of context without permission. In a Truth Social post, Trump labeled the ad fraudulent and announced the immediate termination of all trade talks with Canada. Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney, who had been in negotiations to ease U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminium, has not commented. Trump also accused Canada of trying to influence the U.S. Supreme Court ahead of a hearing on his global tariff policy, which has pushed American imports duty to their highest levels since the 1930s. The dispute comes as both nations prepare for a review of their 2020 Continental Free Trade Agreement next year. Away from that, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has appealed for calm, urging Washington to avoid what he called a crazy war as U.S. military operations intensify in the Caribbean. The plea follows President Donald Trump's announcement authorizing covert action against Venezuela, part of what the U.S. describes as anti-narcotics operations. Washington has deployed stealth aircraft and Navy ships, but has not released evidence that targeted vessels were carrying drugs.
Venezuela quiere paz. Somos hermanos de ustedes, trabajadores, trabajadoras. No a la guerra, no a la guerra. Not war, not war, not war. Yes, peace, yes, peace, yes, peace. Forever, forever, forever. Esto se llama lenguaje tarzaneado. Si se traduce al español tipo Tarzán sería no guerra, no guerra, no querer guerra, no a la guerra de los locos, no a la locura a la guerra. Esa sería la traducción, ¿verdad?
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has declared his intentions to run for a fourth term in the 2026 election. Lula made the announcement during a joint news conference in Jakarta alongside Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. The 79-year-old leader, who previously served 2 terms from 2003 to 2010, before returning to power in 2023 remains constitutionally eligible to run again.
Vou disputar quarto mandato no Brasil. Vou disputar quarto mandato no Brasil. Então...
Now, to help unpack this, we're joined by Bolu Michael B., foreign policy analyst. Thank you so much, Bolu, for joining us at this time. All right, let's hear from you, Bolu. At nearly 80 years, President Lula insists that he is as strong as ever. But can age and energy truly sustain the demands of leading 200 million Brazilians for another term?
79, 80 is no small number.
All right, Bolu, are you muted? I cannot hear you. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Continent, and we apologize for the break. We had to sort out Bolu's audio. Bolu, thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Sorry, we actually did not get to hear what you had to say about President Lula insisting that he's as strong as ever, and we did ask if age and energy can truly sustain the demands of leading 200 million Brazilians for another term. And also, the polls actually shows that most Brazilians do not want Lula to run again, citing age, health, and fatigue. Yet he leads, in election matchups. So how do you explain the paradox?
It's an irony. I think it's a classic situation of buyer's hesitation, and that's because they are used to a familiar brand. It's like, you may be tired of a product, but still hesitant or you might still be skeptical about a new product that comes to market. And the same applies to politics as well. So people complaining about wanting change, but at the same time, when they look at alternatives, there's no one they can trust more than Lula da Silva. There's no one that has the popularity, the stature, and the competence of Lula da Silva. So many people are able to separate that Lula fatigue from Lula's competence. They may be tired of him, but they still see him as the safest pair of hands in certain times. He has done that once, he has done that a second time, and he's doing that again for the third time. Brazil has recorded economic boosts, so that things that are, giving him big points, back in Brazil. And also, when we look at the weak opposition, Bolsonaro is gone, 27 years in jail. He would have been a really tough opposition, and there's no new face to replace Bolsonaro as a strong opposition. So you've got a reluctant but stable base keeping Lula da Silva on top. And when you look at the performance of even the younger ones, it's a far cry, compared to Lula's success. If not, Bolsonaro would have won the last election. So it's a situation of little or no alternative for Brazilians right now.
All right. Now, Lula actually built his career fighting power concentration, and now seeking a fourth term. Is he betraying the democratic ideals that he once championed?
Yeah. When we consider what he stood for in the past, it will become a moral issue, because he was someone that was against power hoarding, and now he's he has made a declaration that he's going for a fourth time. So that's kind of a contradiction. So he was a fighter against custodians of power. On paper, what he running for a fourth term is legal. Constitutionally, Brazil allows for a leader to go for consecutive terms, have a break, and they can come back again. That's why he's coming back. He's there now for a third time, and he can go for a fourth time. So, but symbolically, he risks looking like a person that is hoarding power. But his supporters may argue that is just staying there to finish a political project and not hold on to power. For older voters, they might feel like, it's just a full circle of contradiction. But his core supporters will believe that he has a leftist agenda he wants to cement in Brazil, and he has unfinished business, so he has to go for another time. It's a really, contradictory and controversial debate.
So you talked about him wanting to, cement his agenda. We know that if re-elected, Lula will serve 16 years, extra. That's the longest. He'll be the longest democratically elected leader in Brazil's history. So is it about legacy or an unwillingness to let go of power? Because we know once some leaders get a hold of power, it is difficult for them to let go.
Well, at his age, I believe what he should be after is legacy. So I would say it's a mix. It's a mix of both. Legacy drives on people, about sensible politicians as well. So I believe he wants to cement his place behind historical figures like Vargas, for example, in Brazil history, but through democracy. He's an institution. Lula da Silva is someone that is really popular. I mean, I've been hearing about Lula da Silva since I was really young. He's an icon in Brazil. He's loved everywhere. He's very charismatic. So I believe he's actually trying to cement his legacy. It's one. Some could argue that it's about control as well. He may not fully trust a successor to defend his left-wing agenda or ideology. So while he's saying that he has unfinished business, it's also to an extent an old guard's reluctance to hand over the keys of power to the younger generation.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bolu Michael B, for your time and for speaking to us on this.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's our take on Beyond the Continent. From the boxing gloves of an 80-year-old Lula da Silva to the ballot box of Brazil's next election, we've seen how political endurance can defy age and reshape history. But not every legacy is met with applause, because after the break, we turn to Ethiopia, where the Amhara, once architects of empires, now face persecution, displacement, and war.